Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the day 2 of the 9th International Conference on the Asia Economic Development towards Sustainable Development Goal, or SDGs, Poverty Eradication, and Inclusive Sustainable Growth. My name is Pichaya. I'm the Capacity Building and Training Economist at the ADBI. I will be the Master of Ceremony for today. Before we start the conference today, let me just recap our house rule for all of us. So for the moderators and the speakers, please keep your video off and also mute your microphone when you're not presenting. If you have any question, you are able just to type your question on the Q&A box. And please raise your hands because there's a raise your hand option if you would like to discuss something directly to the moderator or the host. For participants, there will not be video or audio allowed for you. However, you're able to type your question in the Q&A box too. We will provide the time for Q&A and discussion, so you can raise your hand if you would like to discuss something directly with the host or the moderators. Again, we would like to seek cooperation from all moderators and speakers to keep your talk within the schedule with approximately 5 to 7 minutes in order to provide sufficient time for active discussion and also the question from the floor. Today, we would start our session. Before we start our session of the conference, we will start with the keynote address from Professor Emeritus Dr. Naoyuki Yoshino from Keio University. Allow me to briefly introduce him. So Dr. Yoshino, besides being the Professor Emeritus at the Keio University, he also the Director of the Financial Research Center at the FSA Institute Government of Japan. He received his PhD from Johns Hopkins University. He has been teaching and also visiting scholar at the various university and well-known institutes. This includes State of University of New York at the Buffalo, USA, MIT, USA, Central Bank of Japan, as well as the University of New South Wales in Australia, among others. He also received the Fukuzawa Award from Keio University for his contribution to research. As some of you may be aware, he was the Dean and the CEO of the Asian Development Bank Institute during the year of 2014 to 2020. Unfortunately, he wouldn't be able just to join us today, so he sent the video for his keynote address. May I ask our IT coordinator just to put his video for the keynote address. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome the keynote address from Professor Yoshino. Oh, he's here. Oh, sorry. Professor Yoshino, are you able just to present?
Either one is okay. I sent my video already. Is it okay to present?
Oh, yeah, of course. If you like to present real time, that would be so much better.
Okay, then.
All right. So I give the floor to you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for your introduction. I hope I can set up my Zoom. Can you see my video or not yet?
Not yet. Okay. May I seek for the IT coordinator just to help with the video or the PowerPoint presentation, please? All right, Professor Yoshino, the floor is yours.
Can you see my PowerPoints?
Oh, we can.
Okay. So thank you very much for inviting me today. I would like to discuss about savings and investment, redevelopment, and growth. And I looked at the 9 points which are important for sustainable development goals. First one is promoting domestic savings and circulating domestic savings within the country. And second one is infrastructure investment, which also can attract long-term investors. And third one is SME and startup businesses are very important to grow. And number 6 is a human capital development, including education. And 7 is proper tax system and fair tax collection and anti-corruption. And lastly, environmental protections. I think those are the very important necessary conditions for sustainable growth. And the United Nations SDG goals by setting up 17 goals. So one of the important things is environmental issue among those 17 goals. And we have observed huge temperature increases and high rise of ocean heat. And we have observed lots of environmental problems. And recently people are talking about SDG investment is very important, not only looking at rate of return and risks. So many institutional investors started to look at SDG component or ESG component. However, when we
All right, I think we actually lost the connection with the Professor Yoshino. So maybe in the meantime, I think we can skip this keynote address and then start with the section 3 first, if that is okay with everyone. Dr. Pete?
Yes, I'm here. We are ready.
Okay, so I see that other speaker in section 3 is already joined us today. So would it be possible for us to switch this one first, and then maybe we can have Professor Yoshino deliver his keynote address afterward?
Sure.
I give the floor to Dr. Pete and also Dr. Jirapa for section 3.
Okay.
One second. The IT guys, IT staff, please, allow me to turn on the video, please.
We cannot turn on the video.
Okay, start my video. Okay, now. All right.
Okay.
All right. Okay, now finally we can see each other. All right. Good afternoon, Kap.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to session number 3. The theme of this session is poverty eradication for inclusive sustainable growth. This is one of the most important agenda in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It is included in the 17th goal of the Sustainable Development Goal as goal number 1. In this session, we will have opportunity to hear from the experts in the field, their analysis and experience sharing. We have a good mix of speakers today. We have speakers from an international organization, an academia, and a government agency. Without delay, I would like to introduce to you our first speaker, Dr. Kittapong Arayapracha. Dr. Arayapracha is currently a senior country economist of the World Bank for Thailand. He also covers Myanmar and South Korea. He worked at the World Bank, focused on macroeconomic assessment and structural reform. Dr. Arayapracha had an impressive career path. Prior to joining the World Bank, he worked at the Bank of Thailand in Monetary Policy Group and at Bui Pakon Research Institute. He worked at the Stock Exchange of Thailand as a director of Capital Market Research Institute. He also worked at International Monetary Fund as an economist, where he participated in program negotiation and surveillance mission to Egypt, Georgia, Nepal, and South Korea. He also assisted Thai National Reform Council on economic financial reform. He holds a PhD in economics from Columbia University, the United States of America. Welcome, Dr. Arayapracha. The floor is yours.
Hello, thank you for inviting me. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Let me try and start the video. How many minutes do I have?
You have 5 to 7 minutes.
Okay, let me summarize briefly. So I hope everybody has had the chance to look at the PowerPoint, but I have 2 slides to present. But let me give you a quick overview first. So actually, in terms of poverty eradication, the World Bank looks at Thailand as a success case in terms of poverty eradications. And over the last 20 years, poverty rates have come down significantly. So extreme poverty is now almost 0%, while poverty is around below 10%. And in the last few years, poverty has come up a little bit given the persistence of drought in the rural sector. So that is still, I think, still a concern in Thailand in terms of poverty eradication. But what I want to highlight today is the impact of COVID-19. So in terms of the impact of COVID-19 in ASEAN, I would say Thailand faces the largest impact. So we project GDP to fall to -5%, which is the lowest amongst ASEAN. Although all ASEAN member countries have faced large cuts in the GDP numbers, Thailand is the lowest, around -5, while Indonesia, Malaysia around -3, -4, and China is now, at a historical low. So why is it so bad? So I get this question a lot, and I think there are a number of reasons. One is Thailand is very exposed to the tourism sector. 15% tourism sector is quite large. Secondly, we have a large export sector that is connected to global value chains based in the region, with China at the center. So it's a large manufacturing global value chain in the sub-region, Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, China, and Japan, and they have all been affected. So those are the two main reasons. And also, if you look at the impact in terms of the people, the impact is huge. So we project 88 million workers to have been affected by COVID-19 in this quarter. And why is that? Well, a lot of these workers are in services sector related to tourism. They're working in hotels, restaurants, logistics, and they're all being affected. And secondly, Thailand has a large informal sector. More than half of the labor is in the informal sector, and they have no social protection scheme. So if they become unemployed or they lose their jobs, there's no safety net for them. And so let me show you a slide. So we did the scenarios to look at the impact on people. Can you see my slide? I'm wondering if you see my slide. Report. You can read it online, but I think I'll highlight the slide. So we when they have any workers in the sector, and also we look at agriculture. This will be the workers affected by drought. So Thailand had a large drought last year. And then the blue bars are the households that don't have any workers in these affected services or manufacturing sector. So they tend to be more the white collar workers in the high value added services, which is more mobile. What you can see is that all households, all significant of each decile is affected. But the impact is larger amongst the poorest and the bottom 40% on the left-hand side. So these were the services sector where we see the largest the impact, and we did a breakdown in terms of the formal and informal. And you can see that the informal sector constitutes a huge chunk in the commerce sector, services, tourism related, and also in the farming sector, agriculture, because of drought. So we did a scenario where we looked at if these affected households lose their incomes, but nevertheless receive some cash transfer from government, around 5,000 baht, would they fall into poverty or would they fall out of the middle class? So if you look at the pink part, which on the left-hand side is around 7%, you can see it doubling to 15% on the right-hand side after the shock is introduced. So that means that people are falling into poverty. They're falling out of the middle class into economic insecurity. And we define economic insecurity as if you're below $5.5 a day and you're at high risk of falling into poverty, if you become ill or you face another shock, another income shock. So you're very high risk. So we see this category as more relevant to Thailand, where Thailand has had success in eradicating poverty, but the class that is insecure is quite large. So it's around 15%, which is a doubling of the economic insecurity. So to meet this challenge, Thailand will need to upgrade its social protection system. So Thailand's social protection system has been very much employment-based. But if you're in the informal sector, you would not be covered by the social protection schemes in Thailand. So what is interesting about Thailand, I think there are many lessons that many other countries can learn from what Thailand did for COVID. So Thailand was a success in terms of the public health containment. So cases are now single digits. Thailand, we also see as a success in introducing the 5,000 baht transfer scheme. So if you were in the informal sector and you lose your job, you would be eligible to apply for the 5,000 baht cash transfer, which is close to the median income of the informal sector and is quite generous compared to other social assistance schemes in Brazil, Mexico, Philippines, for example. And it had some difficulties in the beginning in terms of the coverage. Some people felt they were left out or they weren't able to apply. But we see as a success in terms of the speed. So Thailand introduced it very quickly because it had all the instruments in hand, such as the SIPs and systems of the databases on who were in the social protection. Also, it had a digital payments, we call it prompt pay, that allowed the government to send cash to people affected. So it will be able to assemble all these instruments in place. But it also shows that while Thailand has instruments in place, it never had the will to put them together in a permanent fashion, for a full-fledged social protection system, which we think would be, very important for sustainable growth going forward, given that these shocks would still be reoccurring. So I think I've run out of time. Maybe I will stop here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kiatipong. We will have next speaker.
Yes, but before, I'm sure that many people have questions to ask, but somehow we have Q&A session later on.
Yes.
So
and also, it seems like we have experienced the bad connection. In case that we have bad connection again, maybe we might suggest the speaker to turn off the video and have just only and have just only the audio. If you experience that difficulty again, okay. For now.
Next one, yes. Now time to our next speakers. Then our next speaker is Professor Dr. Tang Siet-min. So he received his PhD from Cambridge University. His academics and professional career is in the past 25 years span across UK, France, USA, Australia, Southeast Asia, India, and Great China. At this moment, he is the Dean of International College of Panjapiwat Institute of Management and Director of Center for China-ASEAN Studies. So the center is one of the most active think tanks on China and ASEAN in Thailand. It has conducted research projects for the governments on the topics such as high-speed train, Belt and Road Initiative, right export of Thailand, renminbi, internationalizations, science and technology in China, trade and investment in Great Mekong sub-regions and TPP negotiations, as well as business consulting projects in the area of banking, seaport development, food processing, tourism, retailing, e-commerce, and real estate. Now, the floor is yours, Professor Dr. Tang. And you have about 5 to 7 minutes, Dr. Tang.
Dr. Tang, are you there?
I cannot hear you. Oh, Dr. Tang, can you turn on your
Yes.
microphone?
Can you see me now?
Oh, yes, I can see. I can
Yes.
hear you now. Yep.
Yeah.
Good.
I have a PPT. Can you see that also?
We can see. Yep.
You can see the PPT, right?
Yes.
Oh. Yeah. So thank you for inviting me for the conference. I see this cannot work.
Dr. Tang, we cannot hear you.
Yeah.
Can you see the
share screen?
Somehow.
We've seen the screen before, but right now we haven't seen it.
Okay. Never mind. Can you just hear me, right? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So I talk without the PPT. My topic is about poverty eradication for inclusive growth. I don't know why the PPT does not work.
The PTT.
Yeah, right now we see your videos, we see your.
Only one part, right?
So we have your presentation, then you just keep talking, then we can get your PowerPoint presentation ready.
Okay.
You can keep going.
I can see my PPT there.
Yes, yes.
Basically, I think talk about what China achieved its ambition to eradicate poverty by 2020 under this COVID-19 environment, and what lesson we can learn. You see, the situation of China is they set a goal to have a zero rural absolute poverty in this year, and zero poverty counties in China. In the past years, it has reduced poverty quite successfully. If you can see the PPT that in 1978, they have more than 250 million people, or 33% people live below the poverty line. But last year, only about 6.8% people, rural people, live below the poverty line, which is, as the international poverty line, means people has income less than $1.9 per day per year. China's poverty line is slightly higher than that, but almost the same. So the goal is to reduce this poverty line in rural areas to zero, reduce the poverty people in zero. If you look at the major structure mechanism, I think important thing is they have set up an information system in 2014 to record every family below the poverty line, so they have more precise goal and plan in different village how to reduce this poverty of these people. And of course, the most important mechanism, I can see there are 5 most important mechanisms. The first one is business development. That means to develop local products, something like the old top in Thailand, with leading firms. They set up leading firms, leading factory, workshop in different villages. But something different is they have support of e-commerce. Many families in the rural area can sell their product through e-commerce mechanism. And also they have a system of so-called target procurement. That means the coastal cities have the target to buy this product from the poor villages. The second issue is called relocation migrant. So far, they have relocated 9.6 million people to new areas from their hometown, which is hopeless in terms of natural resource. So relocation and migrant worker in the city is the second mechanism. The third mechanism is ecology compensation. So the one interesting case is they build solar energy in the poor areas. So on this land, they have solar panels, and the poor people, poor family can share the revenue from the solar energies, and also get employment in environmental protection project. For example, look after forests or have ecotourism. And the fourth mechanism is education development. So they have scholarship for universities for poor people, give training, and also universities join the technology transfer programs to transfer technology to poor areas to start new business. The last one, of course, is social security. Now, about the poverty line, there also are so-called social security safety net to provide subsidy for people have income below the minimum income for subsistence. So this is the fifth mechanism. If you look at the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, China just announced their new figures. Actually, Q1 this year, they have a GDP growth minus 6.8. But Q2, the GDP rebound. Now Q2 figure is 3.2%. Consumption, investment, export also still negative growth, but consumption Q1 is minus 19%. Q2 is minus about 4%. Investment Q1 is minus 16%, but Q2 is minus 3%. Export Q1 minus 6.5%, but Q2 is minus 0.2%. So overall, the situation improved. And government also tried very hard because this is the target year for eradicate the poverties. So the major figure can see the migrant workers, more than 95% already go back to their job, the town for their employment. And the government also create lots of so-called public welfare posts to employ the people in poverty for the public welfare posts. For example, looking after community, looking after senior citizens, looking after road and something like that. And the leading firms I mentioned, the leading factories or poverty alleviation projects, also in operation about 80 to 90%. So I believe that probably they can still achieve their goal this year to eradicate poverty, defined by about around 3,000 yuan per year for rural population. I mean, people must have income above this level, about 3,000 yuan per year. So that is the situation. I think the lesson we learned, there are about 5 lessons we can learn. I think now in the post-COVID decade, now we have a complete new international situation, right? Especially the conflict between China and the United States. So I think for this issue, it's more important to changing our discourse from the ideology difference to issue of governance. The idea is not the ideology conflicts between democracy or despotism, but more probably we should learn from each other in terms of the issue of governance, whether the government can have effective policy to bring the welfare of its people. So there are 5 issues about governance. The first issue is the political commitment, how to mobilize and collaborate the financial human resource. The second issue is so-called strategic of precision elevation eradication with database and a village-specific plan. So the poverty eradication should be more precise, using information technology using database. The third issue is the role of infrastructure, logistic and technology. For example, e-commerce play an important role there. And also the concept of ecology and environmental protection. The fourth issue is it's a market-oriented approach. It's not just
sorry to interrupt, then could you please wrap up because the time is running out?
Just 1 minute, just 1 minute. The issue is about market-oriented. It's not just give money to poor people. And the last issue is emphasis on both supply side, because they set up a leading firm and quality standard, and also the demand side. For example, the target procurement from a city to buy the products from the poor areas. Okay, that's all for my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Tang. This very informative, presentation. It's interesting to see that Chinese government is have high ambition to get the poverty down to 0% with all the strategy you just mentioned. Then we save time for our Q&A later on. So it's time to invite our last speaker for this session today. Yes,
Yes.
Dr. Jilapa.
Yes. For the last speaker of this session will be Dr. Dagao, Dr. Narayan Dagao. He is currently work for Ministry of Finance of Nepal. He is in charge of coordinating international development cooperation and development partners. He graduated from Kyoto University in the area of development management. He specialized is political economy of foreign aid and incentive-led interplay among various actors. Dr. Dagao was engaged in drafting development cooperation policy for Nepal. He is one of the proponents of Global Partnership for Effectiveness Development Cooperation, also known as GPEDC. He has engaged in monitoring and evaluation of Paris Declaration on aid effectiveness. He was national coordinator for monitoring of GPEDC and represent partner county constituency in the International Aid Transparency Initiative governing body. Welcome, Dr. Dagao. The floor is yours.
Thank you, moderator. Are you hearing me? Hello?
Yes,
Are you
yes,
hearing
very
me?
clearly. Yep.
And what about video?
The video, it's okay now.
Okay.
Just in case if you run into the difficulty in connecting to the system, you can turn off the video. But for now, it seems like it's okay. Please go ahead.
It's okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, moderator. And so this session is a great honor to be a speaker in this international conference. I was asked to give a status of a progress that Nepal has made in front of the SDG 1, eradicating poverty, and SDG 10. Actually, SDG is being looked after in Nepal by the National Planning Commission, not Ministry of Finance, but there is a huge financing gap in SDG, and Ministry of Finance also this way they are related to the SDG. So at the outset, our upstream policy level also internalize the SDG. 2015 constitution that promulgated after a long conflict. It has also internalized the SDG. For example, under the fundamental rights of the people, there is a right to food, right to housing, employment, right to equality, right of women, Dalits, senior citizen, right to clean environment, health, education, information, and so on and so forth. So it's a very favorable policy environment for the implementation of SDG in Nepal. So with this brief background, I jumped in the progress made in the SDG 1. And let me tell you that all the progresses or the status on this SDG 1 and SDG 10 are taken from the voluntary national review of SDG carried out by National Planning Commission of Nepal recently and presented in the high-level political forum last week. So on SDG 1, the share of the let me start with the people living below poverty line. It's significantly dropped down from 38% to 16.7% between 2000 to 2019, and multidimensional poverty also reduced from 59% in 2006 to 28.6 in 2019 against the target of 6% by 2030. Similarly, GNI per capita reached $197 and in 2020 while the target is 2,500 by 2030. And the social protection expenditure in total budget has gone up slightly from 11% to 12.8%, and between 2015 to 2020. And the proportion of population covered by this social protection also increased to 17% from 8.1% in 2015. And the share of the bottom quintile in national consumption is 12.05% compared to 8.8% target of the 2019. And household with the tangible assets ownership, particularly in the name of women, is 33.9%, which is well higher than the target of 5.1%. And in 2018-19, there was a Prime Minister Employment Program which provided employment to 188,000 population to more than 646 local levels for 12.43 days. And likewise, another program also implemented since 2010, namely this is with poor, targeted around 6,000 groups of people from disadvantaged communities. Next slide, please. On reducing inequality, the consumption inequality was 0.30 in 2018-19 and 0.33 in 2015. Similarly, the income inequality is 0.32, both measured by the Gini coefficient. The share of the bottom 40% in total income and total consumption is 20.4%, 25.7% respectively. Although there are some positive trends, the pace of the reduction in inequality is visible. It is slower than the pace of poverty reduction, and there are many disparities among provinces, regions, economic backgrounds, and various marginalized groups, including sexual and gender minorities, with regards to poverty, income, human development, economic opportunity, and employment. Next slide, please. So let me. Can you turn on the next slide, please? Okay, the policy, I have summed up four aspects in the 4 point. I'll try to sum up in one slide. The policy intervention, the preliminary SDG report was produced in Nepal in 2015, even before the formal official launch of the SDG itself. So very proactively, Nepal started to work in creating policy environment. And after that, Nepal produced a roadmap and status of the SDG, covering the whole SDG period, starting from 2016 to 2030. In 2017, it created actually the baseline information of the SDG in Nepal. And a voluntary national review produced in 2017 and this year in 2020. And another milestone is need assessment, costing, and financing strategy of the SDG, which was produced in 2018. And there are many other policy and policy-related things, for example, monitoring and evaluation guidelines, which are based in SDG, both for subnational and federal level, and other local level planning guidelines, and international development cooperation policy 2019 that actually provides, policy environment for mobilization of the international development cooperation in Nepal, building on the principles of edificativeness discussed at the global level and global partnership for effective development cooperation. And some of the good practices I'd like to share with you. One is the cooperative movement. Cooperatives in Nepal collaborated with the government to reduce poverty and promote sustainable development. And similarly, another good practices is sustainable energy, access to energy. More than 90% of the population has access to electricity, in particular renewable energy. So this, how it became possible, the strong commitment of the government, effective policy initiative and institutional reforms, increasing investment in this area, and support from various development partners and incentive mechanism, etc., made it possible. And this access to energy is not only target in one SDG goals, but it has a interlinkages with other SDG goals. It has a thread, a connecting thread to all the 3 dimensions of sustainable development goals. Some challenges despite some successes in poverty eradication and some not that much successes, but still moving forward in front of the inequality reduction. There are challenges of how to sustain the progress made so far and how to meet the huge financing gap that identified during the casting, and also developing resilience in disaster like the current pandemic, and how to cover the large informal sector into the formal sector. And also the challenges is Nepal's geography is a difficult terrain and difficult political geography also. And the way forward is to have the policy coherence and integration of SDG dimensions. Also prioritize the mutually reinforcing and interdependent SDG response, and targeting particularly the vulnerable people by the SDG. So it's the end of the presentation. Thank you. Thank you. Over to you. All right.
Okay. Thank you very much. Next session will be Q&A. Since we have to finish this by 1 o'clock, we will have
about roughly 15 minutes
15
left.
minutes left for Q&A.
Yes, we have the question from our participants. Yes. So, Dr. Jirapa.
Okay, we have question from Bangladesh from Mr. Mohammed Nawid Saifil. Okay, his question is, eradicating of poverty is one of the greatest global challenges facing the world. Although many ASEAN countries, including Bangladesh, made remarkable progress in attaining it, now these countries are again facing problems in the context of COVID-19 pandemic. How can this challenge be addressed? Is there any scope of constitution, a common networking and financial platform to resolve this challenge in Asia? Through knowledge and experience sharing, could you please clarify this issue? Excellency Gittipong Arya Pracha, Senior Country Economist from the World Bank. And I think this question.
Actually, this question, is not just. I'm sure that many countries in Asia and throughout the world try to reduce the poverty, but because of COVID-19 that just happened, then it seems like inequality is not, even narrow. It's getting wider. Then this is maybe the question for all the speakers. Then, in your idea, in your opinions, then how can we handle this thing? How can we handle the poverty, which is, we try to reduce it, but actually it's getting wider. So maybe go with Kun Gittipong first.
Hello, thank you for the question. Can you hear me well?
Kun Gittipong, I think, could you please maybe turn off your video because the connection is not too good.
Okay, how's it now? I saw the video.
I think
it's better.
It's better.
Okay, great. So I think this is a great question. We are still learning how to respond to COVID. And I think what is clear now is the recovery will be drawn out, taking 2 years or more. And so with growth depressed, it will be very difficult to alleviate poverty. So growth is the single largest contributor to poverty eradication in Thailand and ASEAN in the last 20 years. So I think it will be difficult 2 years ahead. But I think we are learning new lessons on how to alleviate the impact on the poor and on the informal. And I think the role of the state, especially in terms of social protection, will be key. And I think in terms of the first initial stage, the containment stage, I think what Thailand did, and also many other countries such as Brazil, in terms of ensuring that public assistance is spread widely to those that are affected. And here I think the lesson is to err on the side of doing too much making sure that the social system gets to those people that are in need rather than missing people. So try to do more than less in the initial period. And the second lesson we learned is, I think Professor Zhang also mentioned this, is the role of information. Is that you have to continuously monitor and evaluate the effectiveness of your social assistance, social protection programs, to see whether the money is getting to those that need it and whether it has helped them and whether they are aware of the assistance that they are entitled to. So there must be some kind of feedback system. And this is important for COVID, also for a longer term social protection system. And the third lesson, I wouldn't say it's a lesson yet, but a third key challenge or priority for countries is that in the recovery phase, we have to move from just supporting the poor, but also to getting good jobs available. And here the issue of skills will be paramount. So here you can tie reskilling to social assistance to cash transfers. So if you receive cash transfers, you will be eligible for skill training. In fact, it will be mandatory. If you were to receive certain cash transfers, you have to enroll in skills training. And in the time of COVID, digital skills would be particularly important for tourism, for e-commerce, for contactless services delivery. And so I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kap. So, Professor Dr. Tang?
Yes. Can you hear me, right?
Yes, we can hear you.
I think COVID-19 even provide a better chance for poverty reduction, because every country, including Thailand, has fiscal input to relieve for the poor people. So the point is how to combine the money together from this COVID-19 anti-COVID-19 campaign linked towards this poverty alleviation. The 5 issues. The first issue is, of course, is the political commitment. Government should play a role because poverty is a market failure. So political commitment from government to mobilize and coordinate resources is important. Second, as I mentioned, and also the previous speaker also mentioned about the poverty reduction should be more precise. That means we need information database to know, to have a plan for specific village or group of people to reduce their poverty. The third one is the role of new technology like e-commerce, logistic. These are very important in the new era, and also the concept of ecology and environmental protections. The fourth one is, don't forget the poverty reduction should be mainly based on market mechanism. That means we should create a business for poor people, not just give them money only. But of course, we must have a social security network as a minimum support. The last one is we should look both on the supply side and demand side. Supply side is how to make sure the poverty reduction business have a standard and have efficiency. And on demand side is how to create a market for these products. So I just made these 5 issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Kap. Last but not least, Dr. Dakal.
I'm not sure if Dr. Dakal is here. We actually have a question addressed to you. We have 8 minutes now. Actually, we have some more questions.
All right,
Yeah.
so these are the other question that I like to ask from our
Okay.
participants. Oh, Dr.
Okay,
Dakal?
thank you.
Okay, all right.
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
Okay. Dr.
Yeah, I can.
Actually,
Yes, I can read the questions from the question in the chat box that the
yes,
whether
and also if you can, if you can you also address the question from Q&A direct to you? What are the effects of COVID-19 in Nepal's SDG policy initiatives?
Yeah, thank you. Let's start with that. And definitely, the COVID-19 is the unprecedented pandemic that affected all over the world. Nepal is not exception. So many funds of SDG are likely to be affected and even reverted back to the more worse situation. So Nepal has a preliminary assessment, preliminary study shows the hard hit sectors like tourism and remittance, and also employment and agriculture, all related to the poverty reduction. So the rate of poverty is likely to be increased by 2 to 3% as per the preliminary assessment. But it's too early to unless we don't have the updated estimate or assessment of the loss or damages, then we cannot figure out the data now. But the initial assessment shows the hard sectors, including tourism, remittance, and employment, and agriculture, entertainment, and transportation, etc. So definitely, the COVID-19 is likely to revert the achievements made so far back, but we have to link the other SDG like SDG 17 and even SDG 10, garnering the partnership from the global stakeholders, and also enhancing the multilateralism to secure the more support to fight this combat, which is not possible for a single country alone to fight against such pandemic. And the another question I can see is reducing inequalities is really needed. Why not focus on employment generation? Of course, we have to focus on infrastructure development, particularly in the developing countries like Nepal, that also help generate employment hand in hand. But reducing inequality doesn't require, the investment, the large investment. It is more about how to create a good policy environment, and you can use good policy targeted at the inequalities. Reducing inequality is not a separate fund requiring goal, but it is reduced along with the achievement of the other sustainable development goal. It's also the global level. Inequality is not only within the country, but also among the countries. So it's global level is increasing inequality year by year. So even though many of the countries at the bottom of the ladder are making progress and improvements, but the enhanced, comprehensive, and robust global partnership is required, and the scale up, as I said, multilateralism in the area of development assistance is also required, and more facilitating support these countries in promoting their trade and investment will be also critical to promote an equitable global order. So this will also enhance global stability and equitable prosperity for all. Therefore, the international efforts must also be collectively geared towards reducing inequality among and within countries around the world. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we still have a few minutes left, and this question goes to Professor Dr. Tang. So the question is the increase of global interconnection, which means growing across border flow of labors, products, food, data, etc., have been defining the feature of the modern world, right? And of course, the cross-border flow of virus as well. So in your opinions, what the impact of this pandemic mean to globalizations?
Yes, this pandemic will deter the exchange of people directly. Travel, less people can travel across border easily. That's something difficult. But also, on the other hand, it's also create a need for us to cooperate in terms how to fight the pandemic, right? Medically, scientifically, more cooperation, more exchange information, exchange technology between countries necessary. So the pandemic actually create a sense of global community of humanity, right? We live in the same globe. We should fight the disease together. So to create this kind of sense. And also this pandemic also make the global logistic chain more vulnerable. So I think we will see some change in the globalization in terms of reconfiguration of global supply chain. I think some change will happen in this area. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Kap.
We still have 1 minute, and I would like to use this time efficiently. This question addressed to Dr. Kietipong. The question goes, can you cite how effective Thailand's measures towards poverty eradication compared to measures being utilized in my country, Philippines, to combat poverty incidents? Thank you. From Mr. Allen.
Hello, hi. Thank you for the question. So it's a very difficult question. I don't think I can answer it fully, but I will try. So in terms of poverty eradication, in terms of the long time span, you look over 20, 30 years, I think Thailand is a success compared to other countries in the region, compared to Indonesia, Philippines, for example. And I think that the big reason is one is growth. We have enjoyed a high growth in the region at around 4%, 5% growth. Secondly is the quality of education for the younger children has been on the slightly above average side in the last 20 years. Although I think the other countries are now catching up. If you look at the present day system in terms of the impact on COVID, I think actually Philippines has better social protection system in place to respond to COVID, because for example, Philippines has the social registry in place. I think it's more complete database than Thailand, and that's because Philippines has focused specifically on poverty eradication longer than Thailand has. Whether Thailand, it has fallen below the radar because Thailand has focused more on growth rather than poverty in the last 5 years. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much for answer this question in a very short time, but effectively. And the time for this session it's almost out, and this is my turn to give you some summary. Okay, today we learned a lot. Dr. Kietipong Aranyapracha shared with us the insight analysis of the World Bank, the impact of COVID-19 on Thai economy. It is estimated more than 8 million workers affected by COVID-19. Private consumption has been shrinking. The capital outflow is expected, and GDP growth is projected to contract by 5% in 2020. It would take about 2 years for Thai economy to reach the P-level COVID-19 GDP. Dr. Aryapacha emphasized that building resiliency in the long run is needed because of the uncertainty nature of the circumstance. Policies such as better social protection for vulnerable groups by improving social registry as well as conditional cash transfer, such as upskill and reskill worker were recommended. Okay, Dr. Xie Min Tang shared with us the successful experience of China in reducing poverty from 33% of population in 1978 to only 1.7% in 2019. He emphasizes the importance of political commitment, good governance, and having effective mechanisms such as business development in rural areas, government procurement, relocation of poor population to better job opportunity place, and social safety net. One of the good news from China is that more than 95% of migrant workers are now back to work, and more than 80% of poverty eradication projects are back to operation. Dr. Narayana Gao shared experience of Nepal in achieving SDG 1 and SDG 10. Over 20 years, poverty rate of Nepal had reduced from 38% in 2000 to 16.7% in 2019. Some of the good projects contribute to reduce poverty, including using cooperative for rural development, promoting sustainable energy, community forests, and social protection system. Lastly, I would like to thank all speakers for your time and your open discussion. Thanks to audience to their active participation and for staying with us until the end of this session. The time is out and I would like to hand the floor back to ADBI. Thank you very much. ขอบคุณค่ะ สวัสดีค่ะ
Thank you very much, Dr. Tirada and Dr. Pitun. So I would like just to ask the speaker of session 3 to look at the Q&A box. So some of the questions haven't yet answered. If you kindly just type your question directly to the people who asked you the question, the Q&A box, that would be really appreciated. And so just to announce a little bit of the change in our schedule due to the technical glitches today, we have to switch the keynote address of Professor Yoshino to be the next one right after this session. And then we will have the virtual group photo at the end after the closing session. So I'd like to encourage all of the speaker and moderators to stay with us until the end of this conference to have a group photo together later on. So with no further ado, may I ask Professor Yoshino to turn on your camera and that so that we can go to your to continue to your keynote address as we left off. Professor Yoshino, are you with us? Okay. So if there's any technical or bad connection, I would like just to request you to turn off your video and just use the audio.
Okay.
So because we a little bit run over the time, please limit your talk within 15 minutes.
Okay.
Professor Yoshino, the floor is yours. Thank you
very much. Can you see my screen? Hello?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay. I want to turn my screen on. If the organizer has my second page, I would like to just show my second page.
Okay. Maybe you can start your talk and then we try to show you a slide later.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to focus on 9 points for Sustainable Development Goals. The first one is promotion of domestic savings and circulate that domestic savings internally. And in many Asian countries, including Thailand, bank deposits are dominating, and we are lacking insurance and pension funds. So I think in many Asian countries, we have to develop long-term finance, and which can support number 3, infrastructure investment. And then number 4 is small and medium-sized enterprises are engine of growth of Asian countries. And SMEs are always difficult to borrow money from banks. So page 2, if you can show. And then SME has been very much suffered by COVID-19 pandemics. And many banks started to lend money to safer borrowers, and the SMEs are excluded. However, National Credit Bureau of Thailand started to collect big database of SME, and it is possible for them to identify good SME and riskier SMEs. And development of big data analysis will be very important in many Asian countries. And number 5 is existing SMEs have their database, but startup businesses do not have any data. And there are many startup businesses in many developing countries, they cannot raise money. They often go to pawn shops and local money lenders. And startup businesses often have to pay very high rate of interest. There are lots of loan sharks in Asian countries. So another important thing is to regulate those pawn shops and money lenders under regulation of central bank or financial services agencies. And how to provide money to startup finance, it has to be different from bank channel because banks has to avoid non-performing loans. So startup finance should come from different channel, such as hometown investment trust funds or hometown crowdfunding. People in the village, people in the local area can support those businesses. Number 6, human capital development, especially education, will be very important. After the COVID-19, many schools have to be closed, and mobile technology and internet technology, and that could be developed in many regions so that online education can be provided to all over the countries. If online education can be provided, even in remote regions, they can access to the best teachers teaching in various subjects. So I think in many developing countries, after COVID-19, online education and also the distance education will be very important. And number 7 is tax collection and proper tax system. Some Asian countries started to develop, but income disparities are widening because tax collection is not proper. So I think it is very important to look at all those transactions, incomes by digital age, and then fair tax and subsidy system combined together will be very important. That is related to anti-corruption, number 8. In many infrastructure investment, land ownership and land price, land sales, there are always mafia. I had many mafias in South Asia, and they're working very hard to negotiate it with landowners and developers. In order to avoid those corruption in land acquisition, land trust is very important. Thailand has just passed a law of land trust, which means landowners can keep the land and then lease the land to the users. And that kind of land transformation will be very important to protect anti-corruption and also smoothen the infrastructure investment. Last one is the environmental protection and SDG investment. Currently, many consulting companies in Asia are providing services to institutional investors for ESG and SDG environment. However, many companies in consulting companies have different definition of SDG and ESG. And it is very important to have nationwide and global definition clearly what kind of portfolio should be allocated. Otherwise, environmental protections are important, ESG investments are very important. However, portfolio allocation could be distorted. So those are my brief speech. And thank you very much for providing me the second chance to give my presentation. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much, Professor Yoshino. As always, very comprehensive, interesting, and excellent presentation and talk. We apologize for the technical difficulty that we couldn't share your slide, but still, I understand everything that you said is got by point and very comprehensive. Thank you again. I hope you can stay with us until the end of the conference so that we can have the virtual photo group together. Yeah. Please join me again to thank Professor Naoyuki Yoshino for his excellent keynote address.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, now we're moving toward the last section of the international conference for today. So we have listened a lot about the poverty eradication as well as the impact of the COVID-19 on the achievement of the SDG. So session 4, we will turn our attention to more specific area of the financial inclusion for poverty reduction. The moderator of this section 4 is our colleague from ADBI, Dr. Peter Morgan. He's the vice chair and also the senior consulting economist. Dr. Morgan has an extensive year in the financial market as well as the financial inclusion. He is particular in Asia in the last 20 years. He has earned his master's degree and also PhD in economics from the Yale University. His research area are the macroeconomic policy, financial sector regulation reform, financial development and financial inclusion, fintech, financial literacy, and financial education. So Peter, I just turn the microphone to you to introduce the distinguished 3 speakers in your section. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Pichaya. So can you hear me?
Perfectly well, thank you.
Okay, very good. So this is the session on financial inclusion and poverty reduction. Financial inclusion is increasingly seen as a necessary part of inclusive growth. Not only can low-income households and micro, small, and medium-sized firms obtain access to credit, which is so-called microfinance, but they can also access other products such as savings and investment vehicles and insurance. So not only can this help them to build income and wealth, but it also has the side effect of bringing more funds into the formal financial system, which makes those funds available for investment and economic growth. The recent development of financial technology or fintech has created more opportunities for financial inclusion, but new challenges as well. So to shed light on this important topic, we have 3 highly qualified panelists. All are women, I'm pleased to say. So let me introduce the first panelist, who is Kanita Tambundarchai. She's assistant professor at the Faculty of Economics of Chulalongkorn University in Bangkok. And she also serves as adjunct faculty in the School of Management in the Asian Institute of Technology. So she's going to speak on the subject of digital financial services for the improvement of financial inclusion. So Kanita, the floor is yours. You have 5 to 7 minutes. Thanks. Can you unmute yourself?
Okay, yes, sorry. I'm going to share my screen so that everyone would have access to the PowerPoint. Right, can you all see the PowerPoint? Okay, all right. So, so my talk today is going to be on digital financial services and how that helps further the goal of financial inclusion. But since today's audience is more general, so let me just first introduce what I mean by financial inclusion and why it's important before going to talk about digital financial services and its relationship to financial inclusion. And so financial inclusion is not just about access to financial services. It's about access to appropriate financial services. And when access happens, it should also be done in a responsible way, in a sustainable way, and also in a well-regulated environment. So it's not simply about having access, it's access to good quality financial services as well. Now, as Peter mentioned, financial inclusion is very important to inclusive growth. And as I identified here, it actually impacts at least 7 of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So research shows that having financial inclusion has benefits both at the macroeconomic levels in terms of increased growth, as well as reductions in poverty at the national level. And also, it also has benefits in terms of at the individual and household level, where it leads to increases in income, increases in well-being, as well as improvements in the lives and livelihoods, and especially for women. Now, if we turn to Asia, this graph shows that financial inclusion in Asia, a lot of improvements have taken place. And in Asia, there's been a lot of, compared to developing countries everywhere else in the world, developing Asia is actually doing relatively well. However, if you look at individual countries, you can see that there is great disparity. So if you look at this graph, the purple bars represents the average bank account ownership rate in each country. But the height of the bars, the height of each bar represents the gap between the poorest and the richest group in that particular country. And as you can see, the purple bars vary between countries. So that means in Asia itself, there is great disparity in financial inclusion. And also within countries, there is also a disparity between income groups. And research also shows that not only just income groups, but also people in rural areas have fewer access. In many parts of developing Asia, women have fewer access. And in terms of businesses, the micro and small, medium enterprises also have fewer access compared to other groups. So Asia is doing well, but still more needs to be done. Now, when we talk about digital financial services, it's simply financial services that relies on fintech or digital technologies, both for the delivery of financial services on the supply side, as well as for the use by consumers on the demand side. And fintech is defined as technologies that has the potential to transform everything about financial services. So it could lead to modifications or new business models. It leads to different applications of financial services. It leads to different processes, and it leads to different products as well. So it expands the range from the products that customers see to the underlying processes in the product provision. And so in light of this idea, I'm going to talk about how digital financial services can lead to the improvement of financial inclusion on the four main aspects based on the definition of financial inclusion that I talked about earlier. So first, let me talk about access. So universal access is the ultimate goal of financial inclusion. And when you have digital financial technologies, it means that you can access financial services using anything that's digital, especially nowadays, mobile phones and internet. And if we look at the past, the barrier to financial inclusion for people in rural areas especially is that they do not have access to the infrastructure such as banks, ATMs, or even agent networks. But now, because mobile phone penetration has become very high, almost 100% in many Asian countries, or even more than 100%, this means that digital financial technology can overcome this lack of access to physical infrastructure and can expand the network of points to interact with the financial system through mobile phones. So it greatly expands the reach of financial service providers. Now, in terms of the appropriate financial services, once you start using digital financial services, for example, most people would start with payments, paying things online. That generates new data sets that the service providers can then use for multiple things. So for example, there are many super apps or platforms, for example, Gojek in Indonesia and in many Southeast Asian countries now, and Financial Alipay in China. So once you start using these platforms, you generate digital information that then the financial service providers can use to do a number of things. It can use to understand your financial behavior better, so they can better tailor the products to suit your needs. It also allows credit scoring to be done based on your payments data or the data you generated. And so it provides a lot of information that was previously inaccessible. Especially, this is especially important for the low-income groups who are usually in the informal sector, and they usually had lack of access to loans, especially because they had no formal documents to allow for credit scoring to be done. Okay, all right. So it generates new data, so for appropriate financial services, and also because you don't have you don't need as much physical infrastructure now. The cost is lower, and because information gathering is now less costly, it also leads to lower costs. And because it's lower cost to service providers, it also leads to hopefully lower costs for the users of digital financial services as well. Now, the challenge though with digital financial services is the regulations, because you have now newer types of service providers, you have newer types of information gathering, you have newer types of technologies, as well as newer types of customers and so forth and so on, and newer types of products. So in many developing countries, the regulations are still not fully in place. And so the regulations are needed to ensure, number one, that the service providers are sound. They don't put customers at risk. It's also needed to ensure that there has to be a balance between data gathering for appropriate financial services as well as data protection. And finally, there's it has to be regulations in place to protect the consumers from fraud and also to protect the service providers from fraud. So it's still in the developmental stages. And so my last slide is that digital financial services has great potential to further the financial inclusion agenda, but still more work is needed, especially in terms of regulations, and especially with all this hype, we need to ensure that the focus on giving access to the poor and the less included should still be there. Okay, so that's it. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay, thanks very much. So our next presenter is Ms. Gay Santos. She is the Executive Director of FinTech Alliance PH and Chair of the Financial Inclusion Committee of the Financial Executives Institute of the Philippines. And she's going to talk on the subject of the Philippine state of financial inclusion, MSME financing, and FinTech. So Ms. Santos, the floor is yours. 5 to 7 minutes, please.
Okay, I'm trying to turn on my video. Yes, hi. So good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you, ADBI and Chiang Mai University for sponsoring this forum. Anyway, allow me to share my screen. So as mentioned by Peter, I'll be covering the Philippines, the state of financial inclusion in the Philippines, MSME financing, and FinTech as a means to promoting greater financial inclusion. So prior to the pandemic, the Philippines has a very stable banking environment. NPLs are averaging at 12%, capital adequacy ratio at 15%. We score high in terms of financial inclusion policy, and the economy is really growing to the right direction. However, with the sudden global outbreak of the nCoV, it posed a lot of risk to the economy like any other countries. Japan Credit Rating Agency downgraded the rating of the Philippines from positive to stable outlook. IMF cut its forecast on the Philippine growth to 0.6%. And according to ADB, we are expected to lose as much as 5.52 billion and experience a lot of job losses, over 730,000 workers due to the outbreak. So let's look at the MSME financing landscape and financial inclusion landscape in the Philippines. This is based on the World Bank Findex data, looking at the adult population of 15 years old and above, which is around 60 million out of the 100 million population in the Philippines. The percentage of adults with account is around 34.5% of the 60 million. Percentage of adults who borrowed from families and friends, 41.2%. The formal account penetration or formal borrowing is around 11%. Filipinos with bank accounts, it's 15.8 million. MSME finance gap in the Philippines as of 2017 is $21.8 billion. The MSME finance gap as a percentage of GDP is 76%. And as regards to insurance, based on a Sun Life study, from the middle and upper income earners, there are only around 16% who have insurance products. So further on the MSME financing landscape and financial inclusion, access to credit is constrained due to weak credit infrastructures. However, reforms are underway. As I mentioned earlier, we are among the highest in terms of borrowing from friends and family. This does not lead to a sustainable bankable footprint for MSMEs. There's a mismatch on collateral requirements. Traditionally, banks in the Philippines require hard collateral in form of real estate versus what MSMEs actually have in terms of assets like accounts receivables, inventory, and so on and so forth. Equity mindset is not instilled. There's so much focus on access to credit, but not access to equity. We have what we call the SME board, which is under the Philippine Stock Exchange, established in 2013. But to date, there are only 6 MSME listed accessing public funding. On the good note, fintech entities have been thriving in the Philippines and have been offering another route for MSME financing. Now I'm going to touch on the enabling policy. I'm going to focus on 2, but with regard to Bayanihan Act, this is the law that was recently passed to respond to the pandemic, to provide assistance to the Filipino citizens. Personal Property Security Act is a law that seeks to broaden the use of movable assets, anything other than land, to access finance for MSMEs and farmers. As you may know, the pandemic disrupted the global food supply in several levels. It has a devastating impact on the ability of people across the world to access and afford food. According to the UN, at least 265 million people are at risk of going hungry in 2020. What I consider as an almost silver bullet that will address the many challenges brought about by the pandemic is the warehouse receipts financing reform, or the warehouse receipts bill, which is now pending in Congress. It can address food security, as it will provide data to track goods and supplies stored and its movement. It can address post-harvest losses, because it will professionalize the warehouse industry, so goods can be stored and their quality and quantity can be maintained. It will address the logistics as well as the access to finance. Let's take the case of China. E-commerce has fueled the boom of warehouses in China. In the same manner, technology applied to warehouses sped up e-commerce in China. And as you know, e-commerce is the preferred way of doing business under the pandemic. So it will be nice to see a vision wherein countries are able to leverage on the right warehouse receipts financing reform. Another thing that's being undertaken in the Philippines is the Philippines Artificial Intelligence Roadmap. Good news is the digital literacy has been integrated in the K-12 curriculum in the Philippines. It has also been extended as a program to overseas Filipino workers. This undertaking is being led by the Department of Trade and Industry towards what they call Filipinnovation, a focus on science, technology, engineering, agriculture, and mathematics. Today's situation calls for innovation of products, especially for MSMEs. This is an example from the insurtech industry. They have crafted what they call a heartbreak insurance, a way to entice newcomers to the insurance products. The premiums are low, but at the same time, the compensation, if in case of an incident, is in kind. So beyond financial inclusion, fintech is very critical and relevant in mobilizing not just financing, but enabling the business. Among the fintech players in the Philippines, they have lent their technology to the government to address the pandemic. We have what we call the Safe Pass, which manages the traffic of people in business entities. We have the Relief Agad application, which was used to mobilize the assistance to the Filipino citizens during the pandemic. And we have what we call Rapid Pass, which manages the commute of the frontliners. Beyond financial inclusion should be a focus in social inclusion. It is hard to envision a family who struggles to meet their basic needs on a daily basis and then prioritize financial products. So there should also be a focus on social inclusion. That being said, my key messages are actually the earlier speaker mentioned about the conditional cash transfer program. I'm working directly on that effort, crafting their financial literacy training program. I strongly believe that financial literacy should be taken as a parallel effort. There should be more economic empowerment through digital inclusion and jobs reskilling. Innovation is very important to increase accessibility and affordability of financial products. And again, what I regard as a silver bullet to address most of the challenges under the pandemic, the warehouse receipts bill, which I hope will find its way into a law in the Philippine Congress. It is a critical piece to address the issues today of food security, supply chain finance, and logistics. Building trust in the system and infrastructure is important. Governance and transparency among the players should be instilled, not just with the government, especially in the business community during this pandemic. Financial inclusion should not be regarded as a marketing pitch. I've seen this a lot in a number of fintech entities, but it's a question to whom are they passing the cost. It should not be treated as a check in the box. Financial inclusion is a building block towards the financial sustainability. I end my presentation with that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much. That's for a very comprehensive discussion of the situation in the Philippines. Now we move on to our third presenter, who is Chuan-Yin Song. She's assistant professor at the Southwestern University of Finance and Economics in China. She's been there since 2017. Her research interests include household finance, bank loans, and SMEs. Today she's going to talk on e-commerce development and female entrepreneurship evidence from China. So Professor Song, the floor is yours. You have 5 to 7 minutes. Thanks.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I will start my presentation. So today, it is my great honor to join this wonderful conference and to share some of my opinion in how to promote the inclusive development in developing countries. The topic I plan to share today is the important role of e-commerce in promoting female entrepreneurship. First, let's look at the rapid development of e-commerce in China. From the picture, we can find that the development of e-commerce in China is very rapid among global countries. However, few studies have paid attention to the influence of e-commerce on women's entrepreneurship behavior. So we try to provide some empirical evidence on the potential impact of e-commerce on women's entrepreneurship. As we all know, e-commerce indicates that we sell and purchase some products or services over the electronic platforms. And we argue that the e-commerce might attract lots of women entrepreneurs because it will provide lots of business opportunities, and it will also lower the threshold for women to start a business. More importantly, the e-commerce will also allow women to solve the one of the biggest conflict faced by women, that is the work-family conflict, because e-commerce will provide lots of home-based job opportunities for them. With e-commerce, women's access to business information, as well as their ability to analyze relevant information for business operation will also be improved. Meanwhile, women can also start their business by running a retail store instead of brick and mortars on e-commerce platform. So we argue that e-commerce may help to empower women, and also it will narrow the gender gap in entrepreneurship. Then it comes to the female entrepreneurship. There's already a lot of discussion on entrepreneurship, but the attention on female entrepreneurship is not enough given its importance. Meanwhile, we should also pay attention to an important phenomenon, is that the gender gap in entrepreneurship is also a common phenomenon in many countries. The percentage of women who engage in business operation is much lower than that of men. As a result, how to increase women's participation in entrepreneurial activities has been incorporated into the policy objectives of many countries. Both the studies and policymakers have long been concerned with how to effectively promote female entrepreneurship and promoting the penetration of e-commerce into local economy. So in this research, we plan to show some evidence on the potential impact of e-commerce on empowering women through entrepreneurship. In this research, we use the county-level e-commerce development indicator. This indicator is developed by the Research Institute of Alibaba. As we all know, Alibaba is the most biggest online platform in China, and they construct a county-level e-commerce development indicator by using the big data of their online e-commerce platforms such as Tmall.com or Taobao.com. So we use this measure as a measurement of we use this indicator as a measurement of e-commerce development. For the data on women entrepreneurship, comes from the respondent level data of the 2015 China Household Financial Survey data. And in the empirical estimation, we only gave women that aged between 18 and 65 into our final estimation sample. Then we did some empirical estimation with both profit model and endogenous, and we also take the potential endogeneity problem into consideration. And our empirical evidence show that women's probability of engaging in entrepreneurship is significantly and positively related to e-commerce development. Then we did some heterogeneity analysis, and also we try to show the mechanism of how e-commerce development promotes female entrepreneurship. From the heterogeneity analysis result, we found that e-commerce benefits several types of women. It is the women with younger age, lower educated, and women living in the rural area benefit more from e-commerce development. And from the mechanism analysis, we found that e-commerce development mainly promote female entrepreneurship by improving their access to formal finance, improving their financial literacy, and also improving their their tolerance towards risk. So this is the main takeaways of our empirical findings. And our finding, we think our finding have important policy implication for economic development. From the findings, we show that through entrepreneurship, e-commerce provides great opportunities for women in developing countries, especially those living in the rural areas and with lower education level and young women to involve in entrepreneurship activities. This have vital implication for empowering women and reduce gender disparity in entrepreneurship. And our policy implication is that the government in the developing countries should further promote the development of e-commerce and also try to integrate it deeper into the local economy to empower women. And I think countries should also work together to promote the development of e-commerce in international business, though there might be lots of unpredicted difficulties, but we can work together. One issue in our empirical estimation is that we have difficulty in distinguish the online entrepreneurship from offline entrepreneurship. So we will work on this issue in the near future. Thank you. That's all for my presentation.
Okay, thanks very much for excellent presentation and time control. So we now have time for questions and answers. We've got a number of them here. So the first question is from Atul Deshmukh. He's asking, the financial inclusion is a good online course at ADBI. Are there different parameters to monitor poverty reduction in communist and socialist economies? I think I can answer that question. The short answer is no. At this point, there's no separate framework that we use for socialist or communist countries. The next question is Professor Kanita. It says, this is from Irina, says, thank you for your presentation. Uzbekistan was not mentioned in your presentation, unlike other Central Asian countries. Why? Thank you. So, Kanita?
Right, so thank you for the question. Actually, I took the graph from a UN NESCAP report, and I forgot to mention that it's from a selected number of countries, so it's not meant to be a comprehensive graph of all the Asian countries. So I think sometimes it's due to data availability and so forth and so on. So it's yes. So yes.
Okay, thank you. Now we have several questions on the Philippines for Ms. Santos. First, from Patricia Paraiso. There are numerous solutions mentioned in addressing financial technology in the Philippines. What are the challenges in moving forward to these solutions?
Yes, hi, good afternoon. Thank you for that question. So one is the fact that sadly, digital literacy in the Philippines is very low. There are around 63 million Filipinos who don't have the basic digital skills. Infrastructure can also be a challenge. There's a duopoly in terms of providers. We don't have the ideal bandwidth in terms of infrastructure.
The next question is from Alan Octhemia, also from Ms. Santos. Hello, Ms. Santos. How can digital services with respect to financial inclusion help the Philippines to realize the ambition 2040 set by the National Economic Development Authority, which is a government agency in the country? Thank you.
So digital services, as I mentioned in my presentation, there should be some kind of innovation in terms of products and affordability. So I cited the situation with insurance technology industry. They have really come up with products that are not as expensive as the traditional insurance products. The premiums are low, but it's a means of enticing newcomers to appreciate insurance products. And they have a very they offer it in sachet. I don't know if you're familiar, Peter, with sachet products. So if you look at the wholesale groceries, they sell it in bulks. In the Philippines, you will find products in small plastics. So that's the approach. I think it's innovation at the same time, making it more affordable for the people who cannot, prioritize given their household budget.
Okay, thank you. And finally, from Onkar Swami, how is FinTech contributing towards financial inclusion in the Philippines and maybe simultaneously increasing income inequality as financial literacy is high in the higher income groups?
Okay, so as you mentioned, Peter, I'm also the executive director of FinTech Alliance in the Philippines. So tagging along with their value proposition, the FinTech industry has always promoted financial inclusion. They also have invested in social inclusion programs. As mentioned in my slides, even the FinTech community lent its technology to the government to cope with the pandemic. They have developed several apps that will facilitate either the commute of the frontliners, the distribution of assistance to the Filipino citizens, and even a business app to manage the traffic of people within the business entities.
Okay, thanks very much. Now, we don't have any more questions in the Q&A, but I prepared a few as a backup. So first for Professor Song, the variable that you focused on in your analysis of women's entrepreneurship was the online business development indicator. What do you think is the main reason for the positive relationship with female entrepreneurship? And as you mentioned, it sounds like you have been able to split apart online entrepreneurship from offline entrepreneurship, but what are your thoughts on that?
Peter, I think Dr. Song is actually disappeared from the screen. Maybe we have to skip the question to the next speaker first. Yeah.
Right. So let me, okay, my next question is for Kanita. FinTech creates new opportunities for financial inclusion, but also creates additional challenges in terms of requirements for knowledge about products and risks. I call this digital financial literacy. What approaches can be used to increase digital financial literacy among FinTech users?
Right. So Peter, thank you for the question. That is a big challenge, especially with many countries in Asia. There's an aging population, so it creates an even bigger challenge because it's the digital challenge. So I think one of the so some of the quick wins in addressing digital financial literacy is to utilize existing networks of financial education programs that are already in place in the different countries and build in a module for digital financial literacy in terms of the products, the risk, and so forth and so on into the existing program. So that's one way, especially for the adults. Another way is to, because banks and financial service providers have stakes in extending the digital financial services, so they could also help the customers in this regard. And in terms of the younger population who are still in school, it's very important that this is also included in their curriculum and as extracurricular activities, so that they know from very young age that the digital financial literacy in their lives.
Okay, thanks very much. Final question for Ms. Santos. The financial inclusion policies adopted in the Philippines have won a lot of international attention and praise, I think, but the actual numbers for financial inclusion are still pretty low. Being an island country is one problem, I think, and the relatively small size of the banking sector is another. What do you think are the key challenges now to increasing financial inclusion in the Philippines?
So thank you, Peter. Yes, it's true that we rank high in terms of policies. I think the key challenges there, I mean, obviously one is sustaining the political will and the focus to operationalize reforms and laws that are critical to financial inclusion. So as I mentioned earlier, one of them, warehouse receipts bill, is needed to push forward. At the same time, we have laws that have been passed, like the Personal Property Security Act, which broadens the use of movable assets as collateral for SMEs. That needs to be operationalized. So there should be a consistent effort and focus to operationalize all these enabling laws and policies. Second, as I mentioned earlier, digital literacy is very low in the Philippines. There are around 63 million Filipinos who don't have the basic digital skills. So that should be addressed as well. And one thing that's very I'm passionate about, because I mentioned earlier, I'm involved in the conditional cash transfer program in crafting their financial literacy program, a parallel consistent effort in pushing forward with financial literacy across the various Filipino community. That being said, what I've seen so far, financial literacy has been focused on budget and savings. I have crafted the financial literacy program for the conditional cash transfer to include knowledge of different financial products, even the e-commerce, and even issues like consumer protection and cybersecurity. Because if you have this segment of society being well educated in the financial side, they can make more informed decisions in patronizing or appreciating financial products. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. I think that's all the questions we have. So let me just sum up very briefly. I think we've had some very interesting and comprehensive presentations. One point that comes out is the importance of fintech as a way to spread financial inclusion more rapidly, but at the same time, there are challenges because fintech could potentially increase inequality too. So that also places a lot of emphasis on programs for financial education to promote financial literacy and digital literacy, and also the finding about the development of e-commerce as being positive for female entrepreneurship is very interesting. So let me thank all the panelists for their excellent presentations, and let me close the session now. So back to Pichaya.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you very much all the three distinguished speakers for session 4. So we have learned a great deal today, and we moving toward the end of our conference. So you learn about the achievement of the SDG, impact of the COVID-19, and then also the financial inclusion, how to help with the poverty reduction. We're reaching the last section of our conference. I would like to invite the Dean of ADBI, Professor Dr. Tetsushi Sonobe, to give us the closing remarks. Dean Sonobe.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Let me share this PowerPoint. Here it is. Can you see my slide?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. Tetsushi Sonobe, the Dean of ADBI again. Yes, so first of all, I'd like to say congratulations to ourselves. We survived the very busy 2 days. Yeah, actually, it is just 2 hours per day. But during this 2 hours, we had to, concentrate our attention to listening and watching. It's very intensive, and then the speakers had to prepare. So in that sense, it was kind of busy 2 days. And then during these 2 days, we have shared lots of knowledge, experience, and the views with each other. So I think this was a very successful conference. And then there are many key important takeaways. Of course, different persons will have different takeaways. In my case, at least, I learned these things. First of all, many countries in the region succeeded in reducing poverty rate drastically for the last few decades before the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. Then COVID-19 is an unprecedented wake-up call. This is not actually our expression, but this was Secretary General Guterres expression. But we have seen lots of examples of this actual meaning of this message. Yes, so COVID-19 underscored the importance of strengthening the social security safety network system. And then accelerating digitalization will be the key to poverty reduction as well as economic recovery. And the digital financial services can be promoted without huge investment in infrastructure because of high level of diffusion already we can observe in terms of mobile phone diffusion. But and also financial inclusion of micro, small, and medium enterprises very important, and it's very helpful as not only a countermeasure to income inequality, but also the important measure for economic recovery and economic growth. Then women are more likely to engage in entrepreneurial activities in countries where e-commerce is developed. E-commerce is developed better. And then, yeah, so this is a last presentation. This I took this from the last presentation, and then the presenter showed some analysis. So this relationship between the female entrepreneurship and then the development e-commerce could be causal relationship. So e-commerce development may help female entrepreneurship. And the important thing is this is very important in rural areas. This was also emphasized by the Professor Tan Zemin earlier. And the challenges for these good things about digitalization would include one is developing well-regulated environment. And then second is overcoming digital divide. Yeah, so in terms of the good regulation, the international community and each government must try hard to address the problems of cyber threats, privacy invasion, unequal access to digital infrastructure, lack of digital and financial literacy, especially among the vulnerable. But okay, sorry, I'm just a little bit confused. So unequal access to digital infrastructure and unequal distribution of literacy is about overcoming digital divide. So yeah, first we should focus on this regulation part. So for this purpose, for example, the BEPS is important. This appeared today in the Professor Yoshino's presentation, and also the yesterday's conversation between the chief economist, Dr. Sawada, and a young politician from Thailand about his Thai name, because Thai name is very difficult for me to remember. But yeah, tax-based erosion and profit shifting, and antitrust enforcement. These things are very important, in order to promote digitalization successfully. And then the second part of the big challenge is digital divide. So digital inclusion is very important. And then I learned a very nice expression from the Gaye's presentation, so job reskilling. Yes, and then I learned from her presentation that digital literacy has been integrated in K-12 curriculum in the Philippines. Yeah, this is amazing, but I think this kind of training, even for children, will become common in many countries in future, near future. But so digitalization will be a powerful tool for economic recovery and also poverty reduction, and also the social inclusion. But the key point is to how to fight against this overcoming against the digital divide, and then also the difficulty in creating the well-regulated environment. But the core of doing so is good governance and transparency. So I think these are too many for me, for my poor brain, but these things are very impressive and important. And this is the second from the final slide. So I'm very happy to see that the conference has been implemented very smoothly despite several technical problems. I'd like to thank for technical supporters, skillful handling, and also I'd like to thank speakers and audience for punctuality and for their active participation. But it is pity that we cannot have much networking. The virtual conference, this is a difficulty in virtual conference. So there is no coffee break, and there is no chatting during the coffee break. But let's use emails and other devices to communicate with each other. So for that purpose, ADBI is very happy to help you. So please ask ADBI, then we will work hard to connecting audience and speakers after this conference. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dean Sonobe, for your excellent summary and also some fruitful thoughts as your closing remark for the conference. The last section, last but not least, is the photo sessions. I would like just to ask for our moderators and also speaker to turn on your camera so that we can have the group session. Okay, are you able to turn on your camera?
Yeah, I think the host needs to allow me to turn on my camera.
All right, okay. I sent you the, you have to accept the ask for. All righty.
Okay.
Okay. Kun Jaruni, would you like to turn on your camera too? All right, I think we have everyone. Professor Yoshino, are you able to turn on your camera? Okay, let's do the first chart first. Ready, everyone? 1, 2, 3, smile. Let's do one more time, just in case. 1, 2, 3, smile. All right, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. And before we officially close this international conference, I would like just to thank all the moderators, speakers, and participants for your active participation, all the questions, and also we apologize for any mistake or technical glitches. We will learn from this and then improve it to the next event to be better. In this regards, about the improvement, we would like to ask all the participants to answer the evaluation survey that will be circulated with you after this conference. This will help us just to know what kind of the issues that you would like to have for the next event that we will have, and what kind of the problem we should be fixed just to improve this virtual format of the event that we will deliver in the future. And within this note, please join me to give a round of applause to all the moderators and also the speaker, as well as our partner, Chiang Mai University, with your excellent coordination and also organization of this conference. We look forward to seeing you again in our next event. Thank you, everyone, and have a pleasant day for the rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
you.